Epilepsy is a neurological disorder which takes the form of recurring seizures. A seizure occurs when there is a sudden, uncontrolled surge in the normal electrical activity in all or part of the brain. Epilepsy can affect anyone at any age, but most people with epilepsy will experience their first seizure before the age of 20. It is estimated that approximately 1 in 100 people throughout Australia have a diagnosis of epilepsy, making it the most common chronic brain disorder. In an attempt to raise awareness about the educational implications surrounding students with epilepsy, the following interview was conducted in a school for specific purposes where 27% of students enrolled are diagnosed with epilepsy.
So my role at the school is healthcare officer, which means that I do medication administration, I do seizure management. So when any of our students have a seizure, I'll go and attend just to assess the situation and see that everything's okay, that the student's safe, that the student's breathing and that they're out of the seizure. With the healthcare plans, they're scattered throughout the school, so anybody at any stage has access to them. So if they're not certain or unsure about something, or whether they think a student's just had a seizure or not, they can refer back to the healthcare plans, and that'll give them an indication on if what they saw was a seizure, because there's, like I said, there's a little bit of a description.
What if they're still sort of unsure after reading that? Well, can they call you, or do they?
Well, firstly, if they're unsure, it's always safe to call and have someone oversee that has. I do get around the school. I do know what most of the kids' seizures look like, so it's a bit of an indication. If they're not sure, they can call me, and I can go and say yes or no, or it could well have been, and I'll keep some sort of a notification on what's happened. Parents will be notified, whether it be in their communication book, or also we can ring them if we're a little bit more concerned. With certain students, it is better to be safe than sorry, because their health is a little bit more fragile than others. So all students have different seizures. I mean, there's various forms of seizures. Tonic-clonic, which is your arms and legs shaking, your whole body shaking. Drop seizures, where you could be just walking along and then you'll just drop. And absent seizures, where you're aware your body's not shaking, but there's nothing going on. Like you can't get any comprehension out of the student.
With the drop seizures, is that because I noticed that there's a few of the kids with the rugby headgear on? Is that because of that, or is that
one student because of that? He's just been diagnosed with drop seizures. Okay. So that's again just to protect the skull, because we don't know when it's going to happen. It hasn't happened as yet, but I mean, it's just a precautionary measure. That's all that is.
So there was a young lady in one of the classes today that had what you called a cluster. In
the class that you're in, yeah.
Cluster seizure.
So cluster seizures is when they have one and then it goes and then comes back, and it can keep going on and on. So lots of little seizures, and eventually that can get to a point where they can seizure and then just not stop. Hence, that's why we're talking about midazolam. That's something that's administered, I guess, in hospitals as well. That's to stop seizures. Further investigation was done. We found out that she didn't have a lot of sleep through the night, and that can be a trigger. Lots of things can be a trigger. High temperatures, the coming on of sickness and things like that can be a trigger. You know, I suppose you've heard of the flickering lights. That can be a trigger, like strobe lights and things like that. A lot of brain activity, not a lot of sleep, a lot going on. You know, there's physical. Lots of different factors can be triggers.
And just with her, the end result, like the way it was managed, was that her parents were called.
They chose to pick her up. They said she didn't get a lot of sleep. It wasn't that we rang them to say come and get her. We rang them to let them know that she's had 3 and that we're monitoring her, and if she has any more, well then, you know, we'd be letting them know. It was their decision to come and pick her up and take her home to have a sleep. Because of the nature of our school, every SLSO that's in here is trained in healthcare procedures, so everybody can do tube feeds. Whenever we do staff development days, we're trained up in CPR, we're trained up with asthma management, we're trained up with seizure management, so we're all trained up to the same level in that respect, so we all know what we need to do. Parents, before they come in, they'll let us know that they have seizures and give us an indication and a description, so we can incorporate that into their healthcare plan as they're enrolling as well.
Just further with the seizure management plans, you're a part of the development of those and the implementation and the maintenance of those?
We implement the seizure management plan is pretty much like a standard procedure where it's 5 minutes. If it goes over 5 minutes, we call an ambulance, notify parents, make sure the student is comfortable. Having said that, parents do sign off on that so they know whether that's the way that we're going. So if we feel that, their seizure has gone far too long, we will call an ambulance and let them know that we've done that. Depending on the situation, we may call the parents first, then an ambulance. But if it becomes an emergency situation, it'll be an ambulance, then the parents. So they'll be notified in that order. Like I said, they sign off on it so they know what our procedure is. That's fairly standardised across the school. 5 minutes seems to be the cut-off point. Having said that, you do get to know the students. You know when something's not quite right or something looks a little bit different. Many a time I've had to ring a parent because a seizure that looked a certain way to me at one point and then looks a little different, I will ring and say, have the seizures changed? Is something different? Just so we're aware, and that way I can let the rest of the staff know too that something's different or the triggers are different or something else has happened. Staff that's on class with a student that will have a seizure, they're quite familiar with that specific student. They know when something's not quite right, you become very familiar with it. I go across the whole school, so I see the whole of the kids. That's with the healthcare plans, it's for students, say like we have a student or staff and students in room 2, fantastic. They know their students, but they not necessarily might know a student over in room 7 having one for argument's sake because they haven't had a lot to do with that student. So it's just to make everybody aware of how the student's seizure and what it looks like. With his seizure management plan, it says that we will time the seizure, that if it lasts more than 5 minutes, we'll call an ambulance and administer a ml of midazolam by the buccal root, which is in the inside cheek and gums. So that is something to stop an ongoing seizure. So it's quite a strong drug, and that wasn't taken lightly when it was taken into consideration. Having said that, like I said, he hasn't seizured for a while, but that's there purely as a preventative. If he does go into one, that's what we'll do while the ambulance is en route.
And that's relayed to you guys through the parents?
And the medication is given to us through the parents, and it was something that was discussed beforehand. Were we prepared to do that if we needed to? Were we comfortable to do that? And then it was incorporated into his healthcare plan. So if a student's here that's never had a seizure before and has one, or what we assume could be one, we will automatically call an ambulance because that needs to be investigated as to why it's come on them all of a sudden. Just again, maybe that they all look a little different. They all go for different ranges of times. And we get familiar with it and we know when something's not quite right and that we need to maybe take it a little further or address it a little differently. But generally it's just a minute monitoring, making sure the student's safe, they're breathing. That's obviously the most important thing, to make sure everything's okay and that they come out of the seizure. And we sort of monitor the recovery time, how long the actual seizure goes for, how long it takes for them to come out of the seizure, and and they're all different. Some of them come out like that. Mm-hmm. Some of them take another 5 minutes, to really come out of it. They're dazed, and some of them don't want to eat when they come out. Some of them get quite clingy, but they're all different. They're all individual. It's like everything. Every student is individual.